Welcome to the Rise Up For You podcast, where thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives from around the world share their practical tips, strategies, and stories to help you unleash your potential and achieve your goals. Your journey of growth to become your best starts now.
Hi, I'm Netalina Nasruddin, the CEO and the founder of Rise Up For You and the podcast host of the Rise Up For You podcast. We have another amazing guest for you today, but before we jump into our show, I want to remind you all that our show is completely ad-free and commercial-free. That's right. We want to make sure that you get full access to this podcast interview without any interruptions. So I have just a really small ask for you. We would be absolutely honored if you can share this podcast, send it to your family, your friends, your coworkers. Help us get the message out for this podcast because we are bringing you amazing interviews every single week with executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders that are here to help you become your absolute best. Share this podcast with anyone that you think would love to listen to it. Don't forget to subscribe and like so that you can get access every single week to the episodes that we're bringing straight to you. We appreciate you, and without you, this podcast would not exist. Okay, what do you say? You ready to jump into today's interview? I'll see you there. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Rise Up For You podcast. This is your host, Netalina Nasruddin, and I'm very excited today to bring to you another amazing guest who I actually had the pleasure to meet in person, and I can't say that about all of my guests. So please, wherever you are, whether you're watching this on YouTube, listening to it in your car, on the treadmill, help me welcome Rick Jordan to the Rise Up For You podcast. Welcome, Rick. Thank you for joining us.
What's shaking? You know, it's we were side by side physically, and now we're side by side virtually. I like this.
Yes, I love that. And I know we didn't have a lot of time to talk in person, but I knew just from the few things that you said in the panel and obviously researching you, what you do, I definitely wanted to have you on the podcast because there's a lot of amazing work that you're doing. Actually, before I jumped on here today, I was thinking like Renaissance man is kind of what came to my mind, like pastor, best-selling author, like so many things. So in your own words, tell us who you are. Let our guests know a little bit about you.
Yeah, my name is Rick Jordan. I am the CEO of ReachOut Technology, my day job. But like you said, that's there's a lot of other things that I get involved in, you know, and that's why we actually were at that event that I was sponsoring with David Meltzer, is because just putting things on for entrepreneurs. I absolutely love seeing people get from point A to B in life and the growth that takes place in between. You know, that's the thing that really gets me moving forward. So even technology, right? I'm the CEO of a public technology company, but I'm a speaker, an author, an entrepreneur, an investor. You know, that's how I continue to build things so that a lot of people can benefit from them. It's always all about the people. And I think that's what's lost on a lot of businesses today, a lot of things, even in the political arena today. You know, it's all about the people. And that's one thing that we have to keep in mind, is the human aspect of everything in life.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that I find really interesting about you, Rick, is, you know, I want to talk a little bit more about your background and how you got to where you are, but it's clear that you've paved a path that's very diverse, that you've been able to adapt, right? So you're still in the cybersecurity technology space, but you know, you were in corporate first, then you moved into entrepreneurship, speaking, and so on and so forth. And so walk us through how you kind of got to where you are today. Where did you start, and then how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a good journey as I think back through it. And I think back to the days of, I always take my sales experience back to McDonald's, you know, which I started working at when I was 15. And it's like, it was the art of the upsell, you know, do you want to supersize that? Would you like fries with that? Would you like fries with that was my absolute favorite question. And I carried that into Radio Shack. Do you remember Radio Shack? You know, it was around for a little while. Yeah. I mean, they sold all these transistors and all these things, but I was a store manager there. And prior to that, when I was an assistant manager, I was only 17 years old, and we were selling cell phones for a penny. You know, back before the days of obviously iPhones, Androids, all that, but it was cell phones for a penny. And everybody that walked up to the counter, even if they were just buying AA batteries, I was like, hey, would you like a cell phone for a penny to go with that today? And it's literally just the quantity of that, and asking every single person for the order. As a 17-year-old, December, Christmas season, I sold 300 cell phones out of that one store, just me, and we got paid a $100 spiff for each phone from the carrier. So I made $30,000 in commissions at a Radio Shack.
Wow.
Just when I was 17 years old. Imagine that kind of money coming in when you're 17, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what to do with it. Guess what I did? I bought a new car. I bought a Pontiac Grand Am, a brand new Pontiac Grand Am with that. And it was, I think, all the way back to them, but they taught me how to read financial statements, profit and loss statements, so I was always involved in that. But I want to tell you something I was telling somebody the other day that I never really recognized. I saw the movie Twisters, right? The sequel this past weekend, which, by the way, go out, see it. It's amazing. That was the very first thing I wanted to do when I was like 7 years old, is I wanted to be a tornado chaser. And I was thinking about this. It was actually, I think, with my barber. I know, right? Yeah, that's what I was examining, right? I got this fresh fade yesterday. I was at my barber, and I'm telling him this, and he's like, well, I think everybody wanted to be, when that movie came out. I'm like, bro, that movie came out in 1996, and I'm not trying to sound old because I'm only 44, right? Yeah. But I'm talking when I was 7 was like 1986. Okay, not 96. So this was 10 years before the first movie, and we had the bookmobile from the public library come to the school every week. It was, you remember that? Right? The library brought itself to you at the elementary school. Yeah. But I remember getting on there and checking out these weather books. And I'm like, what in the world? Why? And I'm trying to think, it's like, why did I even like that back when I was 7? And then I remembered my dad telling me a story who, I had a very close relationship with my dad. Jay, we can get into this some other time too, but he passed when I was 16. But I remember him telling me about this tornado that hit Oak Lawn, Illinois, which is right outside the city limits of Chicago. And when he was on the basketball team at the high school, and this tornado was coming through, like hit the gym, and he was up against the side of the gym. His sister was with my uncle down the street, and their car got lifted up and thrown back down onto the pavements. Like, that sounds, it sounds like this really scary but yet awe-inspiring thing. And that's when I started looking into it. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, I love the understanding of things that are chaotic and why they are chaotic. Like, this was just a revelation this past week talking with a coach. Literally, like, going back that far into my past, it's like, I love the revelation and the understanding the things that are chaotic in life. So if we can grasp that understanding, imagine how much we're above the levels of a lot of people, but that way we can actually bring the others up to us. It's pretty cool. Imagine if you could understand why the reasons for chaos exist and what you could do with that knowledge.
Be very overwhelming, but also very empowering, like you said, to take action and to make positive shifts, for sure. You
got it. Imagine like traumas, right? There's all this, let's be real. Trauma is quite the buzzword these days. Gaslighting was like the Webster word of the year in 2023.
Yes, that's right. And stonewalling and all,
Yeah, but imagine that, understanding the whole, because trauma is a big thing these days. And imagine understanding the chaos that was in somebody's life and the reasons why somebody has those thought patterns that they do, and how to overcome those things, So if you can start to define those edges around the chaos, I fully believe that we can actually push through the chaos. So yeah, whether it came to that, then after that I wanted to be a cop. Then I ended up working for Geek Squad because it was a brand new thing. It was chaotic, right? Yeah. It was, Best Buy was rolling it across the country. I was the first Geek Squad agent in Chicago. But then, I get laid off from Best Buy, right when my twins were born, which is when I started my technology company. But all through the while, I helped plant 3 different churches as a pastor in the Chicago area. So all of this stuff is like, think about back to the tornado, right? It's a lot of things swirling around, but you can make sense of it, and then you can put it in its rightful place and then actually move forward with it in life.
So why do you think, because for me, when I hear you say that, it takes a special type of brain, right? That's wired differently, that can actually function and succeed in chaos, right? Like, you want to be right in the middle of the fire and you're going to rise above it and succeed. A lot of times we don't see that with people, right? It creates more stress, especially in today's world with so much that's happened in the different generations. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of individuals that even the slightest bit of chaos, and then they completely shut down and they become like mentally crippled, and they can't take any kind of action. So why do you think for you, you've been able to thrive in those type of environments? Is there something that you think you've been wired differently, your family, your childhood? What do you think contributed to that?
I do believe a lot of it was my family and the way that I was raised. And I want to emphasize this for parents out there too, because there's a phrase that I have that I've raised my own kids now. I have twin 17-year-olds. They just turned 17, boy, girl, and then a younger 14-year-old. And there's something I've always said, if they're old enough to ask the questions, they're old enough to know the answers. So, I mean, they could have an example, they didn't, but if they asked me about sex when they were 4, it's not going to make up a story about a stork or something like that. Or, when a mommy and daddy love each other, a baby just said, no. If they legit had asked me when they were 4, it didn't come much after that. It was like 6 or 7 when we actually had a real conversation, and I held nothing back from them, obviously a tactful conversation. We're not talking about, you're going to have 2-hour sex sessions with your partner in life, really having it wasn't that. It was about more reproduction and how that takes place, Yeah. But I mean, the other stuff, it's like sex is fun, at the same time, you're not going to lie to them, and that's or just kind of divert off the subject. I've never done that. And my parents never stifled my desire for curiosity and knowledge, and the desire for understanding, which I think so much is just built into every child, and when you look back at that, I think it's one of the most important things for parents ever to indulge and encourage the natural curiosity and desire for understanding that kids have. So, a lot of parents I see will get frustrated if the kid asks why, or asks so many times, why. But it's like, I always respond.
So, right? That's the response.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So. Yep. Yeah. It's like you're in my brain, Now, my mom, I love her, absolutely. But she was one that would have more of a propensity to say exactly that because I said so. My dad never did, and I'm like, I never want to say that phrase to my kids. So this desire for understanding was always encouraged. That curiosity was always encouraged. So I don't think that I had a leg up, on anybody. I'd like to think that I'm a pretty intelligent person. I've got a high IQ, I've got a high EQ, all of that. But some of it's the way that you were born, and some of it's the way that you were encouraged, without those limitations that were placed. And I'm grateful for that. So it's like, if I can go out on a mission and tell everybody that's listening to your show, if you're a parent now, or you're going to be at some points, encourage your kids' curiosity, encourage them to try 100 different things. Don't shelter them. Let them break their leg, quite literally, if they want to jump off of something, let them go after and find out all the information they can off of anything, and then also do it with them. Because there's some things we probably don't know. It's like, if my kids ask a question, it's like, I don't know. And that's an okay answer too as a parent. Absolutely. It's like, but let's go find out, dude. Let's go get the information and learn together.
Yeah, I love that. Because when you're talking, I'm thinking about my childhood as well, and kind of how my brothers and I have become who we are. And I would say the same thing. My parents always encouraged curiosity, self-confidence, failing. Like, even if we did fail, it was like, get back up. What are you going to do about it? They always, and even when we did ask a question, my dad would say, well, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? Like, he never wanted to just give us the answer. And so I resonate with your response. And I like that you're calling out parents in a positive way, because I know that part of what you do, and a big part of what we do, is really to help serve human potential. And the next generation of youth is a part of that, right? Yeah. And the adults today are the ones that are going to create that circular movement, because everything is cyclical. And if we can't break the cycle and help them build these skills, then we're going to keep seeing some of the chaos and the things that we see today. You wrote a book and you talk a lot about situational awareness. I mean, Rick, you and I could talk for hours, but I want you to talk a little bit about the situational awareness, the situational ethics that you talk about, and how to spot an ethical person, because we're in a very interesting time in our society. We have an election that's coming up. There's a lot of chaos that just happened with, the president assassination, resignation of Biden. This is the time that we're in right now, currently recording this podcast. Yeah. So ethics, values, morale, I think for specifically through North America, actually, I would say globally, is a really big thing right now. People want to know that there's ethics, there's values, there's morale behind what's happening and the decisions that are made. So I kind of, if you can, I'd like for you to talk about the situational ethics on a macro level, just like on a big picture level, but also if I'm that business owner, or if I'm a leader in the company, or even just like a new entrepreneur, how do I identify and understand like who I'm dealing with ethically and who might not be the best person to partner with or to hire because of their ethics?
Yeah, all great questions, and I'll preface it with this. You're never going to get it 100% right because we're dealing with humans, and even in a lot of ways, I've noticed that my compassion will, if this is going to sound bad the way that I say it, but it's quite literal when it comes to business, compassion can get in the way. And everyone's like, have compassionate leadership and everything, but it's like you also have a responsibility when you're running a business, especially if you have employees. You have a responsibility to everybody else in that organization. And even if you don't have employees, solopreneurs, I was looking in the Wall Street Journal this morning, which by the way is still one of the best publications in the world, I think, the journal. There's I actually believe that the way that they read is very, very much unbiased. And as you're talking about some of the political shifts, I think the journal is probably one of the more middle leaning publications that's out there. By the way, I'm not affiliated. I don't get any credit or anything for saying that. But I was reading about the solopreneur, and even a solopreneur has responsibilities beyond themselves to their customers. So if they're even looking for a vendor, to buy from, or a product distributor or something like that, it's like working with those individuals. It's like, are they going to be able to fulfill on an ethical level what I need to for my customers? Everybody has responsibilities beyond themselves. And even if, in this world to where it's like a man's like, oh, I don't need a woman in my life. It's like, or a woman's like, I can do it on my own and all that's like, you're still negating the whole reason why we're on this planet, which is to interact with other people.
Yes.
So to your question about situational ethics, now you've got to understand that everybody falls on this spectrum of ethics from all the way on the really bad side to all the way on the really, really good side. And nobody, I believe, is inherently bad or inherently good. I just think we are. That's it. We're all humans. So, and it depends on the situation. And then it also depends on perspective. But the way that I've defined ethics is, when you go into a bad territory, and this is the one question to ask yourself or to ask about somebody else you're dealing with, to your point, is, are they doing this to benefit themselves at the expense of another person? It's the one singular question that like overarches the entire book, that I've defined situational ethics. Are they doing this to better themselves at the expense of another person? Or are you doing this to better yourself at the expense of another person? And if you break that down, it's like, if you're doing something to better yourself, that's absolutely good. Everybody should do everything they possibly can, even all the way down to what some people think. Well, like, oh, that person's arrogant, pompous because they're promoting themselves. Well, duh, who else is going to be your biggest promoter beyond yourself, especially when it comes to business? Any entrepreneur, any C-level executive has to promote themselves. Any line-level employee to get promoted in the company, if you actually want to get promoted, it's not like somebody's going to come and save you, or a musician be discovered all of a sudden. You have to promote yourself. You have to do things that better yourself.
Yes.
The thing where you cross the line is if you're doing it at the expense of somebody else.
Yep. Yeah. That's a really interesting definition, and I actually wrote it down because, we're talking about situational ethics, and the balance of that is self-awareness, right? And oftentimes individuals, they don't have that level of self-awareness yet to ask themselves, what is my intent, and why am I doing the things that I'm doing, or making the decisions that I'm doing or that I'm making? I talk about this often, and I'm interested in your perspective on this, Rick, is security, technology, artificial intelligence has moved at such a rapid pace. And these human skills that you're talking about, they've kind of got the brunt, right? Like they have hit the back burner, and there hasn't been the balance of knowledge when it comes to these skills. A lot of times people think it's common sense. It's not common sense anymore. These are actual skills that need to be built. So we see technology moving at this pace, artificial intelligence, cyber technology, security moving so fast. But these skills that you're talking about, even to be able to be situationally aware with individuals or have your own self-awareness to understand how I'm showing up, many individuals don't even have those skills. So in your opinion, how do we balance the two? Because you cross over into these worlds, right? So you're obviously very emotionally intelligent, obviously great at building relationships, but you come from this world of technology. And I have to say, for somebody that works with multiple companies and leaders around the world, that's not always the case. We usually get brought into technology companies because, they're more one-sided in the brain, which is
the guys that just sit in the back room and not talk to people, right? That kind of tech.
Yes. So how do you see us being able to complement one another so that we don't continue to decrease in these human skills? Another article just came out about a month ago from Daniel Goleman, who's the pioneer of EQ, that said we are continuing to decrease in these human skills and the emotional and social intelligence. So I'm just curious on your perspective on that.
I was reading something, and I was actually trying to find it while you were talking here today, because it was around that, and I don't think I can find it quick enough, but it was around that. I'm like, wow, this really resonates with me, because it was about that, and really like how AI is taking over, and all of that. And it was that's what it was. It was a funny meme with Snoop Dogg, it was like, and it was so hilarious, because it was like, these are all the doctors in 10 years that graduated medical school using ChatGPT. And there's Snoop Dogg, right, with the gas, the laughing gas, and like put the nitrous oxide and putting it on the patients, and now they're starting to have a party in the room and everything. I'm like, maybe, and even as I talk with lawyers that are within my company, right, because it's a public company, I have a lot of lawyers, I like them all, but it's like, even my general counsel, has 45 years of experience, he's like the presider over all the other lawyers, and he's like, oh yeah, large language models are going to completely replace lawyers. They're going to completely replace the human aspect. And I'm like, dude, how can that be? I'm like, I can see transactional lawyers, like those who are writing up the contracts for acquisitions and all that, but no way litigators. And it's like, for some of that, it's like, I got into some ego, and it's like, I speak from stage, and I see litigators the same thing. They speak from a courtroom, but that we could call that a stage.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's strategy going back and forth, and it's like, oh no, absolutely. And I'm like, you know what? What if it's more of a combination? What if it's the transactional lawyers will get left behind and the litigators will get left behind, but the ones that will excel, by AI exactly, but the ones that will excel are the litigators and transactional lawyers that use AI. So they're using it to complement what they're doing right now.
Right, what they already have.
Yes, exactly. And I might have a lot of faith in humanity, which I think that I do. And obviously I'd like to think this way, but growing up on like the Terminator movies, we were talking about old movies, the other day, it's like Skynet. Everybody thought Google was Skynet when it came out, and it was going to take over the world, and just, all of a sudden launch all these nukes at everybody, but now everybody's like, oh, ChatGPT is going to take over the world. AI is going to take over the world and completely supplant humans. We're going to have machines building machines. I think a lot of that is fear, and a lot of this actually pulls us back around to where we started the conversation today. Is it's a little chaotic right now in the technology field. It's a little chaotic with artificial intelligence, and a lot of that chaos, from what I've seen, is driven by fear.
Yes.
And if we can have that curiosity and the understanding to actually gain knowledge about something, because I really believe that, like, the zone of fear is just the absence of knowledge. And I'll tell you a story about my daughter here, and actually about tornadoes, because years later, I ended up getting certified as an advanced trained storm spotter from the National Weather Service.
Get out of here.
Dead serious. Like, I've got the back door so I can call in, And there was this, she's 17 now. So this was like 10 years ago. She was about 7 years old. And there was a tornado warning that our home was in the path of this thing, right? It ended up missing. That's good. But then I'm like, we're going to leave here. It was just her and I home, not that the rest of the family was out. And like, just her and I were like, we're going to leave here and we're going to drive. So we she's like, okay, Dad. So we get in the car, and I'm telling her what's going on. It's like, there's a tornado warning. We're in the possible path. And, there's a tornado that's on the ground a couple miles from here. So we get in the car. She's like, where are we going? I'm like, we're going to go find it. And she's like, what? And then she starts crying, like bawling and screaming. She's in fear. She's terrified right now. I'm like, I always call her little lady. I'm like, little lady, it's like, you are with me. You are safe. I know a lot about these things. And I'm going to take us to the safest spot. And then like encouraging her the whole way. And we get to within a half a mile of this thing. And then we're literally like following it, for a while as we're seeing the rotation and the wall clouds. And I'm calling it in, saying what I'm seeing. But as soon as we got there and she got out of the car and we're looking at it and I'm showing her the radar, it's an app on the phone, and showing her where the winds, where the circulation happens and then the direction that it's going, because you can see the animation loop. And as soon as I start to teach her, educate her on the knowledge of these things, those tears started turning into, oh, wow. And then she started looking at the clouds and the formations and the patterns and everything. And the fear was just gone. And it's because she started understanding. Of course, I'm sure it had to do with, she's a little bit with, she's 7 and her dad's there too, but just teaching her and educating her. And now whenever something happens, 10 years later, she's not scared. And she's like, hey, Dad, can I look at the radar? Here's what I'm seeing on here, and she's looking out the window. She's like, what's that over there? And she's like, do we need to go anywhere? Because I think we could go south and then we could catch it if we wanted. So now she's educated in this and she's not scared anymore.
Yeah.
This is the same thing with AI. It's the same thing with any kind of tech. As soon as humans can get themselves above that technology and really above that zone of fear, they're going to be okay and they'll be able to see a path forward. But that requires that curiosity and that desire to learn. Yeah,
it's interesting because you're talking, and what you just said applies to everything. I know we're talking on a larger level, but even when you think about individuals that don't move forward or don't take action because of fear, and not recognizing that you can still have fear and be proactive, or you can still have fear and learn or take action or move forward. But you're right that so many times when we feel fear, whether it's within ourselves or whether it's in a larger societal problem, we just get crippled, and then we go down this rabbit hole of continuous fear, right? Reading the news, the articles, and like now it becomes like this narrative that's self-fulfilling, right? That like the whole world is, gonna be doomed and end. And so what I hear you saying, which I think is really important, is it's okay to have fear, but be proactive in gaining knowledge, gaining understanding, so that you can take action and you can contribute. Because I do think that with everything that's happening in the world, individual contributors like yourself and I, we can help the cause, whatever it is, right? Yeah. But when we're stuck by that fear, we become crippled.
Yep, I'm with you, absolutely. And another way, if you don't want to have that on, because let's be real, there's some things I'm like, I don't want to learn about that. Like that, I have no interest in that. Or if I get like a little snippet of knowledge, I'm like, okay, I got enough info. But then it's enough to just understand that there's other people out there that are like crazy curious about something like that. It's like, I would never be interested in being a dentist.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that are out there that would. I used to never understand that until I met my dentist, and now I can understand why, because I actually started asking him questions like, why is this so interesting? And he started talking to me about it's almost like a repairman, like a construction worker or something like that. Like you can build stuff, and the way things interact. And now he's got a patent. He's an entrepreneur himself. He's got a patent on this device that's now being mass produced, and being put in a dentist's office across the country. And he's trying to make that better. He's same age, like mid 40s, amazing guy. It's like, that doesn't interest me, but it interests him, and I can put my trust in him. Like when I met him, when I got hit in the mouth with an aluminum bat coaching Little League baseball, and for him to take care of my tooth and get an implant in the same day, I was able to trust him in that process. I didn't want to know how it was done. Sure. I had no care in the world. Was I freaked out? It's like, am I going to keep my tooth? My mouth is bleeding, it's a great story, but that's, what's going to happen here? Am I going to be, look like a hillbilly my whole life, missing a tooth? It's like, you could call that some fear, but then it's like, what? I got a dude who can take care of this. And I'm putting my trust and faith in him. So if I don't want to be curious about something, at least, or understand it completely, I can put my trust into somebody else that has that curiosity and understanding about that topic. And that can also alleviate your fear.
Absolutely. I love that. Rick, this has been a really incredible conversation. Like I said, we can continue to talk. We're going to have you back on the podcast. But
thank you. I'm happy to come back.
Thank you. I'd love to jump into the power section of the podcast. I'm just going to ask a few rapid fire questions. So the first question we love to ask is, if you can leave the world with one final message, we like to call it the golden nugget here at Rise Up For You. What would your golden nugget be?
Never stop looking inward.
That's great. I love that. And we're really big on values here at Rise Up For You. We have values. Even when I built the company, I had non-negotiable values that I wrote down that I said, no matter what happens with Rise Up For You, like these will always be. What's a non-negotiable value for you?
Yep. It's actually threefold. The way I approach everything is calm, confident, never hesitate.
I love that. And I have one more question for you, but before I ask, where can our audience connect with you? I know you're on Instagram, you're on LinkedIn, you got your website, best-selling book on Amazon. If you could share a little bit more. Yeah,
Mr. Rick Jordan on all platforms is the same across all of it. Mr. Rick Jordan. Yes, Instagram, LinkedIn, two biggest ones that are out there.
Okay, perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. Yeah, and final question, as you know, we're the company Rise Up For You. What comes to mind for you when you initially hear that phrase?
Wow, it's what we were talking about literally during the show. We're on this planet for a reason. And even if you don't know what your actual purpose is, like your sub-purpose, I should say, everyone has that overarching purpose of we're here to interact with other people. And we're here to rise up for the benefit of others, not just for ourselves. Right back to situational ethics.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Rick, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It was truly an honor to have you on our show.
Thanks, Natalina. You're awesome.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining the Rise Up For You podcast. Again, every single week, we are bringing you multiple episodes from executives, leaders, entrepreneurs, thought leaders from around the world that are here to provide value to you, to help you push your potential and be your absolute best. Thank you for joining, everyone. I'll see you on the next episode. And Rick, thanks again for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel and check us out on social media. We are everywhere, from LinkedIn to Instagram to Facebook, at our simple handle at Rise Up For You. On every single platform, it's exactly the same. And we're providing new content on every single platform, so there's something different everywhere. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our podcast, and connect with us on social media. I'll see you next time.